Imagine the United States waking up tomorrow and deciding, that's it. No more depending on the rest of the world. No foreign oil, no imported cars, no electronics from Asia, no coffee from Brazil. Everything Americans use has to be made inside the country. That idea has a name in economics. It's called autarky. Autarky basically means a country tries to be economically self-sufficient. It produces its own food, its own energy, its own products, and avoids relying on imports. In theory, that makes the country independent. No one can pressure it with sanctions, trade wars, or supply chain disruption because it doesn't depend on outsiders. The idea usually comes from one simple fear: dependence. If your country relies heavily on other countries for things like oil, medicine, or microchips, those countries have leverage over you. If relations go bad, they can cut you off. Governments that push toward autarky are trying to remove that vulnerability. To see the trade-off, imagine a small town that decides to stop buying anything from outside. At first, it sounds great. The town grows its own food, builds its own houses, fixes its own cars. But reality shows up quickly. The town doesn't have a steel mill, so tools become expensive. It doesn't produce advanced electronics, so computers become rare. Maybe it can grow wheat, but coffee, forget it. Life becomes more expensive and more limited. That's the central trade-off behind autarky: independence versus efficiency. Modern economies normally rely on something called comparative advantage. That just means countries specialize in what they're relatively good at producing and trade for the rest. Brazil grows coffee, Taiwan makes chips, Germany builds machinery, and the United States produces a mix of technology and services. When everyone specializes in trades, goods usually become cheaper and more abundant. Autarky intentionally breaks that system. Instead of asking who can produce this most efficiently, the question becomes, can we produce it ourselves, even if it costs more? And sometimes governments decide the answer should be yes. That usually happens when national security is involved. If your military relies on imported steel, imported fuel, or foreign microchips, that's risky during a war. That's why even highly globalized countries still protect certain industries. The United States supports domestic agriculture and defense industries. China is investing heavily in producing its own semiconductors. These aren't full autarky, but they follow the same logic: strategic independence. Historically, though, full autarky rarely works well. Countries that tried to isolate their economies often ended up with shortages, outdated technology, and slower growth. Without global competition and trade, industries become less efficient, and innovation slows down. In reality, almost no modern economy is fully self-sufficient. Production chains stretch across the world. Your phone might be designed in California, assembled in China, using chips from Taiwan and materials from several other continents. Trying to fit that entire system inside one country would be extremely expensive. Still, the idea of autarky never disappears. Every time there's a war, a crisis, or a supply chain shock, politicians start talking about self-reliance again. More domestic factories, more domestic energy, more domestic production. Because in the end, autarky isn't just about economics. It's about control. Countries trade efficiency for security, and every government has to decide how much independence is worth the extra cost.